welcome to the Cook Memorial Public Library podcast, where we invite you to spend just a few minutes with the staff at Cook Library. I'm Nate Goss, and I am here today with Jo, one of our readers' advisors and a member of the Bookies team. The Bookies is a book, movie, and music recommendation service at the library. You can get to know the Bookies team on our website, Shelf Life blog, and through these podcast episodes, and then you can fill out a quick online form to ask a bookie for some personalized suggestions. So as we often do on these Meet the Bookies episodes, we brought Jo in as one of the bookies to get to know her a little bit more. So welcome to the podcast again, Jo.
Hey, Nate. Glad to be here.
All right, so we're just going to maybe dig in a little bit into what you like to do, what you like to read, what you like to watch, what you like to listen to. So why don't we just start with the basics? What are some of your, maybe let's start with books. What are maybe some of your favorite genres or types of reading?
I like all kinds of books, but especially literary fiction, mystery, suspense, historical fiction. But I like reading new authors all the time, so I don't have that many favorite authors that I always follow. There are a few, though, that I read all their works.
And what would be an example of an author that it's like a never-miss author?
Surprisingly, one is J.K. Rowling, who wrote all the Harry Potter books. My kids grew up with these books. I first read them to them, and then when they got older, they read them themselves. But I think I like Harry Potter better than my kids. But J.K. Rowling is such a wonderful writer and creates wonderful worlds. But when she came out with a mystery series, an adult mystery series, I knew I had to read them. And she wrote it under a pen name, Robert Galbraith, because she didn't want people to know it was J.K. Rowling. The first book, called The Cuckoo's Calling, got really good reviews. And then the cat was out of the bag. She was exposed that it's J.K. Rowling. But by then, people realized she could write mysteries. And they're really good. Cormoran Strike is the main character. And he's an Iraqi war vet who had one leg amputated in the war. And he's now a private investigator. And the BBC is doing a TV series based on Cormoran Strike, and HBO is going to be picking it up.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So I'm really excited about
that.
That
Is really exciting.
Yeah, because I've seen who they've cast as Cormoran, and I'm excited about that. So I think it'll be a good TV series. So if you like a good mystery, pick up the Cormoran Strike series. The first one is Cuckoo's Calling, and be on the lookout for the TV series, probably next year.
It sounds like you actually have a pretty diverse taste when it comes to books, but is there anything that you just don't find that you particularly care for, or you haven't found one yet that's really clicked with you?
Yeah, that's true. I do love all books. The one thing I don't especially like are the romance novels.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't like reading them, and I know they're so popular, and there's nothing wrong with liking romance.
And we should say we do have Bookies team members that love romance, so we can get you covered if you like that. But it's good to know that if you're looking for a romance recommendation, that you might not be the best place to
exactly.
start.
Not to say I don't love a good love story, because I do. But we're talking about the paperback romances. Although it's funny, one of our bookies recently had me read one, and I had to admit it was kind of cute because I thought I should give it a try. And it was about librarians, and it was about an undateable librarian, and I
no such thing.
I know, really. So I tried to challenge myself, and I read it, and I had to admit I liked it. Okay. So there must be good romances out there. I will have to keep trying to find them.
Do you remember what the title of that was?
I think it was called Undateable. It was cute, you know.
Let me ask you this, because you've been here now for, I think it was like 9 years or so. You've been at the library for a long time recommending great books to people. Is there a type of book or maybe a title or a type of reading that you kind of discovered while you were here in this position?
To be honest, it's all the time. You know, every book I read is something new. I'm blown away by all the authors. Like I just finished the new Jesmyn Ward book, Sing Unburied Sing. And
I've been hearing a lot of great things about that.
She's a young author, but this is her second novel. I had read a nonfiction book she wrote that won the National Book Award about 5 young African-American men who she knew growing up and how they all died of gunshot wounds. And very powerful, and her writing was amazing. And so when this new novel came out, I decided I needed to read it. Very powerful. She's been compared to Toni Morrison and Faulkner. So powerful, and that's something I might not have read normally in this job, but because I read the reviews and read about the buzz of the new books coming out, that was something that was recent that I read. Unusual books, too, like the George Saunders book, Lincoln and the Bardo. That was something that was very different. I listened to it. that's something kind of new that I never used to do. I never used to listen to audiobooks, and I'm finding they're great.
Actually, do you find when you're recommending a book to someone at the library, do you sometimes actually say, I would actually recommend the audiobook of this as opposed to the book? Or do you bring format into it? Because I should also mention you also you select the large type materials.
I do, and all the ebook fiction.
Oh, yeah, so you've got a large selection area as far as picking out what books we actually have in the library. So you have probably a really good feel for not only the book, but maybe what format of the book would be best for people.
Yeah, and I think there are some books that really are much better as an audiobook, and Lincoln in the Bardo, I think, was one of them. I thought it was just made to be an audiobook.
Well, and it had a cast, you know.
I know. Was it, how many what you wrote?
Well, it was like Nick Offerman, David Sedaris was in it, and George Saunders read himself for one character, but they were actually almost like listening to a radio play or something.
Yeah, it was great. And the other audiobook I finished recently that I really recommend as an audio as opposed to reading is the new David Sedaris book, Theft by Finding, and it's his diaries. And he reads it, of course, and it's just so funny. They're short little entries, at every day, and he always kept a diary. Every day he'd write something down, and he's so talented at writing about the ordinary and finding the absurd or comical in it. His works are always better on audio.
You mentioned that you're reading all sorts of different types of things, and you don't necessarily always have a specific genre that you stick to too much or anything. So how do you make that decision? Like, how do you make that decision of what am I going to read next? Is it just sort of whatever you happen to have at your nightstand, or is it something that you've read or word of mouth? Like, how do you make those choices for yourself?
Yeah, I'm really fussy. I read so many book reviews and keep track of what books get starred reviews from the professional book reviewers, because there's so many books out there and there's not enough time. And so I'm really, I don't want to read a bad book, put it that way. And so once I have a book to read, I've already scrutinized it. I know what the plot is about. I know the reviews. And so it's very seldom that I'll read a book that I don't like because of the research I've done. However, there are books that I've read that I haven't especially liked when we have our genre study. And
that's your department, the popular
our
services
department, yes. And sometimes because we're trying to read genres we don't necessarily know much about, and right now we're kind of doing women's fiction romance, and the last one, which I will not name, I did not care for.
But that's okay.
But
right?
But it was a good experience because now I know more about this one author who I will not name.
I feel like I get different answers depending on people's personalities, but when you are reading a book and you're just not liking it, are you the kind of person who's going to put it down, or do you feel like you almost need to finish it just so you can make a final verdict on it?
That's a really good question. I used to be, no matter what, I would finish the book. I will get through this. And now I don't do that. If it isn't calling me within the first 50 pages, I let it go. Unless it's a book I'm required to read, like the genre study, then I will tough it out. But it's funny because I used to always read through a book, no matter how dreadful it was. And I'm surrounded by books now, and I just don't want to waste time on bad books. And there are some out there, But usually if I recommend a book, I think it's great.
Do you have something that you would call an all-time favorite?
Yes, and this always surprises people because it is a Western. It's called Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. It won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction, and it's not like I read Westerns, but I am most driven by character development. If a book has really great characters, I don't even care if anything happens. I don't care about the plot or even the setting. The characters are everything for me. But this book has everything. It has the character development of these two old Texas Rangers who go on one last cattle run, and it's very dangerous. And I've read it several times, and it's been a few years. I really need to read it again. It's a big book, and if you like really well-written, developed characters and some adventure and action, pick up Lonesome Dove.
Well, and that's also an award-winning miniseries, too.
Oh, it's great.
It had Robert Duvall and Tommy Lee Jones in it that I've seen that I loved.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
They really captured the characters. I love that series.
I like that. That's a good choice. I like that.
Yeah, and so and I'm sure the library has the TV series.
Well, actually, that's a good segue because I wanted to broaden it a little bit and just ask a little bit about TV and movies. If you're into TV and movies, if you have any favorite shows that you have to watch or anything like that.
Oh yes, I'm still recovering because Game of Thrones is over. I'm a big Game of Thrones fanatic, and I made my husband watch it with me, and I don't think he'll admit it, but I think he's kind of into it too. But yeah, I can't wait until the final season. I love dragons and I love fantasy. The books are great.
Okay.
I just wish George Martin would finish them. He always finds other things to do, but finish the books. The women, you start out in the show and you feel like it's kind of misogynistic, but the women slowly become more and more powerful, and they're kind of controlling things toward the end. It's really cool. I just love that show.
Yeah.
And on a more serious note, we've been watching the PBS, the Vietnam War series.
I've been watching it too.
Isn't it great?
It is incredible. Really.
And this is going to reveal how old I am. But I mean, I was a kid in the 60s and 70s growing up, and the Vietnam War was always on in our living room, Walter Cronkite. And I remember that, but I didn't really understand it because I was a little kid. Ken Burns has really dug up some clippings and some background that I didn't know about. Yeah. It's really good.
Oh, and you're getting the perspective of the Viet Cong at times even.
Isn't that amazing?
And you're getting I think this was 10 years in the making,
yes,
this documentary.
It was.
So, and actually it's worth mentioning that even though it's actually being broadcast right now, I think we already have it on DVD at the library.
I know it's a time commitment and it is kind of heavy. But to these veterans who are being interviewed, my heart just goes out to them because they come home and then they start questioning the war they fought in. And I think it's very well balanced. Ken Burns really, as always, does an exceptional job with these topics.
Yeah. Yeah, and makes it very watchable.
Yes.
Something that it doesn't feel like just a history lesson.
No, check it out.
I actually wanted to know your opinion on it because I know that you also, personally, you had a journalism background before you got into the library, and there's so much about the media coverage of Vietnam in there. And that's sort of a segue into a broader question I had for the Bookies episode here of just how do you think your journalism background has played into how you do your work or how you recommend or how you even choose your reading, especially if you're reading like nonfiction, for instance.
Right. I'm always fascinated by anything to do with the media, especially if it's in a book, a novel. That's kind of fun. I do love nonfiction. It's funny, though, because I was watching the Vietnam War. One of the vets last night, it was Carl Marlantes, and I said, I know that name. And he wrote a really famous Vietnam War novel called Matterhorn, which we have, and I never did get to read it.
Something to add to the list then.
Yeah. But I think, with my journalism background, working in a library is such a natural fit because it reminds me when I'm working with my colleagues a lot of being in a newsroom. And, you're dealing with stories all the time, writing stories, and you're dealing with First Amendment issues and the learning and freedom of information. So there are a lot of overlapping themes in journalism and newsrooms and in libraries. And that's why I think it's such a good fit. I love working here.
You're the one who puts together our, every year we put together our favorite books. It's a booklet that's available that's got our favorite fiction and our favorite nonfiction in book form.
Right.
When we put those out, they just fly. People love reading
they're
those.
They're still going out. I'll come out and go, oh, they're all gone again. I have to print more. But they are very popular. And somebody just came in the other day asking where it was, and Ellen told him, well, we're still reading. It's still 2017. But I try to put them out in December. So you can be looking for them in December, our favorite fiction and our favorite nonfiction of the year. And
it's always a lot of work for you, but it really does. I think people really do appreciate it.
Yeah, and it's kind of like my almost like putting out a little newspaper. I love doing that, and that's more the overlapping again, where you compile things. And same with our blog. I love writing the blog posts about books. That's a lot of fun. Yeah. So I still get to write.
A lot of the members of the Popular Services Department, it seems like mysteries is really the genre that there's like a special love for almost. And I know you do love mysteries.
Oh, I do.
Yeah. Do you have maybe even just some good ones for our mystery readers out there that you can throw out really quickly?
Sure. One I just finished I loved. And if you like kind of the Agatha Christie traditional kind of mystery, you'll like this book. It's called Magpie Murders by Anthony Horowitz. And it's a murder within a murder. The main storyline is a very classic British Hercule Poirot kind of mystery. And it turns out this editor is reading this mystery, and then she finds out or just suspects at the end that the author of the book was murdered. And so she's trying to figure out his murder. And so you got the murder within a murder. It's really good. I also just finished the new Julia Keller book, Fast Falls the Night. All her mysteries are set in West Virginia, where she grew up. And this latest one is about she takes on the opioid epidemic. Really good characters, very well done. So there's a couple.
Well, Jo, it's been such a nice time talking to you here on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Nate.
Yeah, thanks for coming back. Okay, so if you think that you would like to have Jo recommend to you a couple books or maybe a new show to watch on TV, head on over to our Bookies page, which is on our website, www.cooklib.org. And if you want to specifically head over to the Bookies page, that can be found at cooklib.org/bookies, BOOKIES. While on our library's website, you might want to also hop over to Shelf Life, which is the library's blog, and that's where a few of us librarians like to regularly post what we are reading, along with other information like local history tidbits, genealogy help, and a whole lot more. That blog can be found at shelflife.cooklib.org. We'd love to hear your thoughts, maybe even suggest some topics for some episodes coming up. You can always talk to us on Twitter. Our handle is @CookLibrary. And you can always send us an email. The email is webmaster@cooklib.org. If you like what you're hearing, please share the podcast with those you know and let them know that they can subscribe in Apple Podcasts or wherever they like to get their podcasts. Speaking of Apple Podcasts, one of the best ways to show support is just to take a minute and leave us a kind rating. We will be back soon, but until then, keep reading, keep watching, and keep listening.